It's great to welcome back to the program Ruth Ben Ghiat, internationally acclaimed historian, speaker, political commentator. She's a professor of history and Italian studies at New York University and author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. Ruth, it's so great to have you on. At this point, we are about a month and a half, closing in on 2 months into the second term of Donald Trump. I've been saying, my expectations were very low, but it's been worse than I expected. The speed with which many things have happened is sort of even taking me by surprise. Where do you see it? Is some of this chaos a planned strategy which authoritarians and authoritarian wannabes will sometimes use as a tool?
Yes, in the short answer, but we're in a very unusual situation, and I've been trying to figure out ever since January 20th what is like traditional to the authoritarian playbook and what is new. And so many things being done, like purging the civil service, building up the leader cult, trying to control the press more. This is like classic authoritarian playbook stuff. But there's like a structural difference here, and we're all just figuring it out because there's only one man on my cover of Strongman of my book. Here we have two. It's like a co-presidency with Elon Musk, who is in the Oval Office, speaking to reporters and speaking for Trump as Trump sits down. He's at cabinet meetings. He meets
Yep.
with foreign heads of state. And and this giving somebody who's a private citizen essentially just carte blanche to go into to U.S. Government offices and lock out elected representatives. There's something of a coup to that, like a soft coup. So we have two things going on at the same time. They're linked. One is more traditional, and the other is unfolding in new ways. It's like America is innovating the authoritarian playbook right now.
One of the things I noticed that I want to get your thoughts on, and I don't know that this is deliberate, is that Donald Trump, of course, wants to look strong, and he and his followers have a sort of idea of what it means to be the alpha male, and it often has to do with how you talk to people and how you relate to others. Physical strength is sometimes part of it. Trump actually doesn't really meet a lot of these kind of standard characteristics anyway. But one of the things that I noticed is that the Elon Musk Oval Office event, which you talked about, or when Elon Musk stood up and spoke at the cabinet meeting, when you saw Trump on camera off to the side, he kind of looked slumped over and dejected and low energy and not like he was really in control or even enjoying himself. That struck me as different from the images of strength that a lot of historical authoritarians want to project. Is that just because Trump is sort of not firing on all cylinders? Or is there something? It just seemed like the optics were different when you see him slumped over like that.
No, it's very true, and that's why it's very unusual. And I can think of many authoritarians who wouldn't put up with that. It's like a shared power arrangement.
Yes.
That's just not how the strongman rolls, and it's contrary to the great investment that Trump has put in building up his personality cult. I alone can fix it. It's not I along with Elon Musk can fix it.
Right.
So I've been trying to figure out what is in it for Trump. And part of it goes back to your comment about the chaos. I really think that the speed at which things are happening is very unusual. So Trump came to office with a free and fair election. It was not a coup. He was there, in the traditional manner.
Yep.
But the speed at which stuff is happening and the chaos and the reversals, that you see only after some kind of authoritarian crackdown or after a coup. So I think people need to, understand that this is very unusual. And so some of the chaos is because of the speed. And I think that, he was fine to outsource government planning to Project 2025. So there you have traditional bureaucrats, they're very villainous and they're doing all, privatizations, but they had their methodical way and their plan. What he wanted, I believe, which only Musk could give him, was a kind of wrecking ball that was taken to the US government very fast, a digital shock troops. And Project 2025, that's not their thing. So although he looks slumped over and he looks low energy and passive when Musk is talking, he's also defending Musk. So, Musk and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, recently got into a kind of argument, and Trump made them solve it and made Rubio apologize to Musk and thank Musk. So he feels like it seems to be very important for Trump to keep Musk there. And I think it's because he wants to have change very quickly in America. And only Musk and his digital shock troops can deliver that. So he's willing to put up with this. It's like a fall of prestige, right? Which is what you're describing.
What do you mentioned thanking Elon. All of a sudden there's like this it reminds me of the French politesse requirements where in the Oval Office thing with Zelensky, it's have you said thank you enough times, and you should be thanking this person, and people should thank Elon Musk. Is there anything that's worth mentioning about all of a sudden this obsession with thanking people?
I see this as part of what Trump's been doing for a really long time, which is ritual humiliation. I've
Mm.
written a couple of essays for my Substack Lucid on this, and he did it to his own party members during the campaign. So you want people to submit to you, and it has to be on camera. And so they're supposed to thank you for everything, even if you've been an aggressor, because I'm very suspicious of this sudden desire for decorum among people who, had no problem with January 6th, which was a total wrecking. January 6th was hardly about decorum. People were defecating in the Capitol and wrecking it. So these are not people who care about decorum. Otherwise, Trump wouldn't have pardoned all those perpetrators from January 6th. So this is like making people thank you and thank others who you're supporting is a form of trying to humiliate them.
Mm. To go back to the digital shock troops thing you mentioned just a moment ago, I was going to ask you kind of about the parallels between what we're seeing and the kind of concept of shock doctrine. I saw this quote from Russell Vought recently about how he said I'm paraphrasing, but something about how the federal employees and these kind of bureaucratic employees of the federal government, it should be traumatic to go to work. Like
Yes.
the hostility towards them and the environment, it should be traumatizing in some way. We've heard the term digital shock troops and all of it. How does this align with the concept of a shock doctrine?
And it's very sad whenever I see that quote by Russ Vought, because imagine being so mean-hearted that you're devising ways to put federal employees, quote, put them in trauma. That was
Right.
his quote. But there's a very practical aim. It's to get this purge as fast as possible because you can create a hostile work environment. It's so bad that people will resign, right? And then you also can do purges and kick them out, and that's what's going on now. And that's classic authoritarian playbook. Um, but again, it's the speed at which this is happening, which is part of the shock doctrine. And that's why all the executive orders, all the stuff that's happened very quickly, even just from the Trump side. And it reminds us that, again, the Musk and the Trump, they are working together. They have their differences. Who knows what will happen between them? But it's all of a piece to very rapidly change the US from a democracy into something else. And the same with the economy. There's like a conscious effort to engineer some kind of weakness in the economy, to even some people say to wreck the economy, which was booming. The Economist called it at the end of Biden's administration one of the most robust economies in the whole world. And this is supposed to happen very fast. And it makes no sense to many people, but it's part of a design to weaken America. That's how I see it.
And is the eventual goal for Trump to then save it, or is it just to take advantage of the weakness to allow the billionaire robber barons to come in and privatize, or kind of like an all of the above?
All of the above, but especially the second thing. I really think that privatization and deregulation are part of Project 2025 as well as Doge. So again, and if things collapse, then who can come in and swoop up assets at a very preferential rate? It's the very rich, and everything that Trump is doing with getting rid of regulations on corporations, getting rid of corrupt practices, guidelines. Everything is that he's doing is designed to make it easier for people to make money, for bad actors to make money, but also for corporations to not have to bother with regulations anymore.
I want to think about how to bring up this next question. I guess for context, I hear from people who say, "What can I do to protect myself and my family?" And I'm curious what the 20th century maybe teaches us about at the individual level, what people can and could do. We talk about how at scale, we don't
Yeah.
want everybody to leave because then they just take over, right? So at scale, we do need opposition. And also, I'm never going to criticize anybody for taking the steps they feel they need to take to protect their families. Now, part of this is blue states and red states will be different to a degree with some of the things that are going on. Others
Mhm.
no, right? I mean, if they figure out a way to gut Social Security such that payments are delayed, whether you're in Connecticut or Arkansas, that is going to be a problem. So, with all of that kind of being said, what sorts of actions at the individual level does history tell us people can take to protect themselves in these environments?
I think one of the things that strongmen do, they try and wreck what I call horizontal bonds, individuals' bonds with each other, with their communities. And what they want is the mass and the leader. Everybody's loyal only to the leader, and they're adulating the leader, right?
Mm.
And so one thing that has allowed people to get through difficult times is communities, is networks, is relationships. And so this is a good time to embed yourself more into your community, to perhaps repair relationships with your family members or others. And that includes people who you haven't been able to speak to because of political things. Maybe they've been turned against everyone and against logic by disinformation. As as the fallout from these policies becomes more clear, that's an opportunity for everyone to go in there and try and speak to these family members or community members or friends, because it's going to become more obvious that MAGA is not about making the nation great again. It's about ruining the nation, and that suits Putin. It suits, the billionaires. It suits a lot of bad actors. And so embedding yourself with your communities and strengthening your relationships, and also speaking out in ways you feel comfortable, whether it's contacting your representatives. And it's not just to complain to the representatives you don't like, it's also to tell the ones who are standing up for rule of law and democracy that you think they're doing a good job. Because we can forget to reward those who are standing up for us. And it's easy just to complain, but history shows we kind of need to do both.
What does history tell us that these authoritarians tend to do when cracks in their economies start to develop? And the reason I ask that is over the last couple of weeks, when Trump's confronted with the record high egg prices, he's now started to talk about, well, bird flu and Biden. When Trump's confronted with the cracks in the economy, he says there's going to be a transition period. Do you expect a recession? He says, I don't know what I would call it, but we're in a phase where we're going to eventually get to something good. And then he's kind of over the last couple of days just really been silent on the economy.
Mhm.
What do these folks tend to do when, partially due to their own actions, cracks develop in economies?
Well, yeah, that's a good question because right now he still has his valiant loyalists out there on TV trying to do damage control.
Yeah,
Like Senator Tuberville says, "Oh, the stock market was overinflated. It needed to be weaker,
right.
But that's only going to last. That can't last. They can't keep saying that. Even they would know they are ridiculous." So many strongmen have been weakened because their economic policies were revealed to be bad. And here we have an opportunity because we're not a one-party state. We still have, press freedom, and we can speak out about that, right? Even in Chile, the dictator Pinochet, who's a model for many people, and he did privatizations. It was a laboratory for neoliberal economics, and the US backed the coup, and everybody was happy. And then the banks started to fail, and they ended up having to nationalize the banks. And this is when Pinochet became seen as very weak, and civil society protests started with people who had been hurt by losing their jobs, losing their benefits. And so I'm thinking about that example a lot. And we have much more ability to register our disaffection because we're not a military dictatorship. So we have to use one of the lessons is if things are taking a turn you're not comfortable with, you have to use the spaces you have of freedom, of free speech, free assembly to make your voice known and make your voice heard.
Last thing I want to ask you about on that. One of the things that I'm often asked is why don't more people employ some of the activism tactics that, for example, I write about in my book or that others have written about, strategic absence from work and coordinated debt defaults or mass rallies. One of the things that's a reality is that if you have a family, if you have kids, if your health insurance depends on your job, missing a day of work or potentially missing a couple of days and losing the job and then losing health insurance, the system in and of itself prevents people
Yeah.
from getting involved in a lot of these ways. Is that also typical of regimes we've seen in history?
Yeah, this is why we're in an advantageous situation comparatively, because in a real regime, if you didn't show up at the official protest to cheer the leader, your absence would be noted and the
Right.
secret police would come and visit you.
Yes.
If you do show up to protest, you have all kinds of problems, including getting fired from your job. And it's very interesting when I've been studying, we're actually living through a global renaissance of nonviolent protest. And I've been studying some of these successful protests. And one of them was in Israel before October 7th. This was the phase when it was against Netanyahu's attempt to judicial reform,
Yes.
right? And he's trying to stay out of jail. And one of the reasons the protests were so successful and they lasted so long is that employers, whether it was the tech industry and at one point even Mossad, hardly a liberal organization, were giving their employees time off to attend a protest like once a week. And so that allowed people to do this without having to risk their jobs.
Right.
I'm thinking of these examples from places around the world, or in Poland, when people came out for a huge, one day rally because it was one day and it was special right before the election, employers were lenient with absences.
We've been speaking with Ruth Ben Ghiat. The book is Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present. Always really appreciate your time and insights.
It's always a pleasure, David.